and we can use this later in December. So the idea is thinking about the process of developing templates. I wanted to just talk through how I usually do this or how I used to do this and that I want us to do in December to get everybody on the same page. And I think it also helps going forward because I honestly believe that this process of creating templates and creating SOPs, it seems like extra work, but it's actually saves a lot of time later. Because what you're doing is you're finding a way to document all the knowledge you gather when you're trying to fix a task that involves scientific writing or that involves learning a particular method. And then you find it easier or you find it in a way that is, sorry, hang on. I'll start again my speech. I just got a message of somebody that needs urgent attention.
Anything we can help with, João?
In the meantime, I can tell you guys.
A close friend is going to be in this department, trying to see if we can get somebody to run them.
Oh no, sorry.
Go ahead,
Just gonna say that in the meantime, if you guys want to go to the Teams channel and check out the one of the themes that we come up with for the Gemini template Wonderland, you're most welcome to. You can share the link here. Let's see if you guys can see it. This is a AI generated music theme for the template thing, just for fun. And I can share the lyric. If anyone is versed in music writing, can please criticize and adapt.
Oh my God.
I heard it before joining the meeting. It's so good. It's so good.
It definitely has a festive. Ashley says it's hard. Okay.
No,
Has
it's
a
so
festive theme to it. But of course we could try different music styles and see how it works.
I think it only misses a bell in the middle of the melody to be more festive, be more 1%.
You're muted, Ashley.
This could be you. This is what the other things Rob Eater was referring to in addition to the link that he shared here. But I mean, do you want a sweatshirt?
The feedback that I got from the marketing department here at my house, for those that don't know, that's from my wife. She says that maybe the font is gonna be a little hard to read depending on how this is printed on the shirt. So maybe that's something that we want to look at, if we can have like a, proof before actually.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good point.
Recording. All right. So this year is a GitLab project that we labeled as Gemini, of course. So it's created under the Duke GitLab structure. So all of this is protected under the Duke firewall and networks. So it's a safer environment and recommended environment for us to share code. And I was doing some tests, but basically I have been documenting the projects that I've been working on with this. And I was doing some tests to see how we can share ownership and share backup and pushing code privileges. And I started doing that by creating a few groups for the projects in a way that we can actually, among the people that are working in the projects, we can select, so let's say I am working with all of the Snakebite projects, so let's share only the access for this one with me, while maybe I should not have access to prep data because I'm not in the prep codes because I'm not in the prep IRB. So I'm doing some tests. I already invited a few folks and shared this with a few members with the group so I could check those. But this is gonna be one thing that we can look more into going through December and making sure that everyone is ready to use. The only, I would say, bad thing about this is that we cannot make this totally public. So the person needs to have a Duke email, and they can only see the code here and download code when they log in with their Duke email. So for some things like, oh, we want to share codes in a paper, we would need to use a different resource, either like something like Fakeshare or even like a personal GitHub, GitLab project that is not hosted by Duke. So that's the only downside for that for now.
All right, thank you, Ron. Okay, let me get back to my motivational speech. I love the music. Oh, fantastic. Okay, so let me get back to the what I was saying. So yeah, so there's been a long tradition of research in cognitive sciences that argue with the advancement of knowledge and knowledge sharing and the amount of information we're exposed to and all of that, that a few approaches for you to expand your capacity to learn, but also not learn, but retrieve information, you've learned, or being able to retrieve memories of things you've learned is by building ways that you can easily access that. And that goes all the way to concept of extended cognition and enhanced cognition and things like that. And when I was studying that at the time, this was one of the ways that I think that's very beneficial for us to do that, because it's very hard for you to know everything and keep everything at memory. So you want to try to keep things at arm's length. And in thinking about how to better write about methods and about analysis and learning how to do several types of analysis, we need to have good working templates and repositories to feed from. What we do in practice is that we spend a lot of time figuring out how to accurately write a paper when we're writing that paper for a mashup that we did, for analysis that we did, and then we drop that, and then we go for the next one, which might be something different. So either you do the same thing over and over and over and over to a point where you are very good at it, and you can kind of do it by heart, or you have a lot of materials to learn from. Or if you have to do several different things, you focus on understanding what is the structure of the thing you're doing, so you can understand the structure of things you're trying to learn. And then you focus on creating ways to retrieve the information you once learned easier, faster, or in a way that you don't need to spend a lot of time revisiting that. So that translates to a bunch of things. It translates to commenting your codes when you're coding. It translates to writing up memos of things you've done, writing up. People used to try to teach us to do um, really like making notes of things you're studying. We call them fichamentos in Portuguese, but what everybody would teach in science school. But then they're just useless because you don't ever go back to review a bunch of text you've written. The way I think it's more useful is if you go and put it into a way that it's uh, something that you're going to use in practice, and the knowledge is already distilled there, and then it's easier for you to consume that knowledge again, and then just bring back the memories you've generated when you were learning. The other benefit of this is that it increases our capacity to train people and to get people that start working with us to the level of performance that we are working on now, because we're giving them tools that allows them to learn faster, but also produce documentation and follow the steps to learn that we followed, learned, and now create those steps for other people. So I think it's incredibly beneficial to do it, but it takes time, and I think it's hard to find motivation to do it. So with all that said, the concept of trying to build these templates is for us to build the structure. And we have a few of them that we can all look and change and edit, but it has also things, it's got to be something that we continuously develop as things change. And therefore, we want to have documents that are living and that they are simple enough that people feel that they're not frightening because there's thousands of information in there, but they are always accurate and they are always up to date. So the idea is after you wrote a paper on something, you would go back and then you would just edit the template based on edits you had to do to add a new method, to add a new approach, to add a new way of doing that same analysis you've done before, and keep that document alive, because that's where we're going to store the knowledge, right? So with that said, the way that I've been going about building templates, and I'm sure Anna has built a bunch of them, João Victor as well, Nathan has worked on this as well. You guys can share other ways you think about doing this. But the way that I've been always creating templates is by looking at documents that already exist and then creating structure, very, very tight structure around it. So it's both easy for me and it's both easy for a trainee to try to follow those steps. So when we go to our template document, let me share that. Wherever that is. Document. Uh, I have a bunch of windows open, but it's only showing me 3 or 4. Okay. All right. So if you go in our toolbox, and this is again today. This is not the right one.
It's on the Gemini spreadsheet, João.
Yeah, exactly. I was showing this to Sarah yesterday. Okay. So if we go in our toolbox that's sitting on the Gemini spreadsheet, we are kind of populating these as we go with documents. But the idea is that we want to try to build things for the main methodologies that we once really narrow them down what they were and what we wanted to work with. So I'll choose one that doesn't have a template built yet. But let's start with one that we do have. So for the cross-sectional studies template, the structure for the template is really something that you can plug and play. So it has a chunk of text, and here's some color coding João created to try to guide how people wrote about it, but then we don't actually follow the color code yet because we didn't have to build it. So just ignore that for now. But the idea is you're gonna have a standard text that tells you how to write about that method. And the areas you're gonna customize, we put in brackets and have this yellow piece. Because the idea is if you're trying to write about that particular study, this is gonna help you not just get the writing right, it's gonna help you get the writing in a way that it's acceptable for publication, but it's also gonna give you things you need to think about when working with that method, and that's gonna push you to study those things. It's gonna push you to study how to answer those particular brackets. And of course, in the end, if you wanna change the way the structure of the sentence is, it doesn't matter, but you're gonna follow the steps that we as a group have agreed that are the steps we need minimally to have a good reporting of that methodology. Then you would have that for the entire methodology with a set of examples of how it was built in some papers. This is one that we started. It probably needs some work to organize it, but it's got there, and so we stopped in the middle because we didn't really complete it. But so if I were to start this from scratch, and I want to start with this one because it's the one that I know that we have good references to follow. So for cross-sectional studies, as much as for any kind of observational study, we have good reporting guidelines on what we should report and what we should think about reporting. So the way I would start writing a template is that I would open up a document like this, and then I would go to the appropriate reporting guidelines. So I would go into the Equator network, find the reporting network that is associated to that particular study. So here it is, observational studies, get the strobe. Sorry, I don't want any cookies right now. So strobe. And then the strobe will give me a list of items that I want to put in my template. So as soon as I pull up the strobe checklist, is that what you're seeing now, or is it still my browser?
We see the browser for Equator Network.
Okay. So as soon as I pull out, let me share the window. Okay, so as soon as I pull out the strobe network, the strobe checklist, and that's going to be the same thing for the majority of the checklist, if not all, then all of these sections here become a section of the paper. And then all of the subsections become a subsection of that appropriate subsection. So if this is a methods paper, I'm trying to do a template for cross-sectional studies, I'm not necessarily going to use the structure for the introduction, which is right here, background and rationale, because we have a template for how we like to write introductions in our group. But I will review this and I'll say if there's any particular reference I want to make in the template. So for instance, the strobe reporting guidelines suggest that we state the specific objectives, including pre-specified hypotheses. So I'm going to make a note of that and try to put into a text on how I would suggest people would write this. Like for the sake of the exercise, let's go back to the wherever that is. Let's go back to the templates. I lost it on my windows. Let's put it up again. Sections here. Let's go back to the template and let's see if we have any note of that. So we don't. So ideally, I would like to have in the introduction template, I would tell to follow the template for introduction, but here I would have some pre-specified writing about the objectives. Okay, so this is something that I noticed that is missing, that we have to do. Okay, then I would continue with that work. I was gonna go back there, and then I'll start with the methods. So in the methods, I have the areas that we want to be careful about reporting in any kind of observational study. So that's great. So I'm gonna have a section in my methods about study design, a section in my methods about the setting, a sections about participants, variables, data sources and measurement, bias, study size, quantitative variables, statistical methods, and that's it. I particularly don't like this structure here because I think that we don't necessarily have to explain these things in separate. So I changed a little bit the way we report, but all this information is what we want to report there. And then if you go back to the template, ideally the template's following the same structure. So here we have study setting with a description of the study setting. And then this text theoretically should have in the structure everything that the template or the reporting guideline is asking. So study design is asking, present the key elements for the study design early in the paper. It doesn't tell a lot. So you can go back into the strobe and read what they say the key design are, or we're gonna go to how you find those key pieces if they're not clear. So then in setting, they describe the setting and location. And then for participants, if it's a cohort study, so not a cohort, we're doing a cross-sectional one. So give the eligibility criteria, the sources and methods for selection of participants. So let's go back there. So setting, we talked about participants and eligibility criteria. And then here, there's a little explanation what needs to be there. And then the text. So the study data was obtained from the sample of X target population. The X target population were exposed somehow, or for some reason were invited for enrollment, so the eligibility. And the inclusion and exclusion were, so it's listed here. So that's great. Then you go back there, and then this is how I do it. I just follow all the topics that are here, and I make sure that these topics are covered in the template. And sometimes we can mix up things for a better understanding. So here we have a notion for variables, and then here we have a definition of variables of exposure, outcomes, and confounders, mediators and moderators. I don't necessarily like this because not always we're going to have all of them, and this can be a little confusing for newly trainees. So I just like to have a section for variables that have outcomes and predictors. If we were doing causal inference or anything like that, it would be better to separate them, but we don't necessarily need to do it that way. And then here's a few examples. And then here we have a section for study bias. So we talked about bias separately. And then we combined statistical analysis. So what the template talks about describing how quantitative variables were managed. So any kind of data management that happened. Describe the study size, so sample size calculation, and describe the statistical methods. We kind of combined everything in one place, but all the pieces are there. It sounds like we all know about this, but I will tell you the last 3, maybe 4 papers I reviewed, I sent back saying the variables are not described, and they were not described. The methods of management of quantitative variables were not described, and they were not described. In describing a variable doesn't mean to say I collected data on gender. It means to say we collected data on sex or gender defined as female, male, female, men and women, or use a different classification for sex. We collected data on education that's classified in X, Y, and Z. And the amount of times that I have to send back a paper because there's variables in the table that is not described in the methods happens all the time. Because even though we're coming to the checklist and saying variables are listed here, we're not necessarily doing the job of trying to be concise and clear on what is it that we are clearly describing. So here it says, clearly define all the outcomes, all the exposures, all the predictors, all the confounders, all the effect modifiers, and so forth. So if the template were accurate and the template were able to show that this is how we want to describe, it would be easier for someone who's writing this paper for the first time, or it would be easier for, I don't know, João or Nathan or anybody who is mentoring a student to tell them what's missing for the document to be clear and to be well designed. So then when we come here, let's look at how we describe the variables. So here, outcomes were evaluated using a standardized chord flow. I defined the classification system. The classification system is defined with a questionnaire, which measures and how it works. The questionnaire was adapted previously. So this is specifically for outcome, for questionnaire-based outcome. The cutoffs were, but it gives a good idea of how to decide. But this is one type of outcome. If the outcome is just an exposure, and you say outcome was defined as mortality, you have to specify what mortality at what time point it was defined, and therefore, so we can work on this a little bit, and that's the kind of thing we work as we are writing papers. So if you wrote a paper that your outcome description is not comprehended here, it's time to make a change and contribute to the template that the entire group is going to use. But then that's to say, what do you do when you start a template from a supporting guideline? So you would go to the reporting guideline, and that's what you would start. If there, what would you do if there's no reporting guide, or what would you do if the reporting guideline is not clear and is not telling you all the information that you want? So then what I usually do, and let me try to find another template that's not ready yet. Let's get feasibility studies. Right, so feasibility studies. So the shell of the templates here, but we haven't really done one. And I think that now there is an Equator Network document for feasibility studies, if I'm ever going to find the place where I search for it. But I think there is one, but let's assume there isn't, okay? Which is, I think it's a method that we would use even when there is, because that's how we're going to find the information we want to write about. So what I'm going to do is I am going to learn from the literature the same way we would anyway. So I would start by finding a key paper. And for those that don't know how to find the key paper, go back to our YouTube channel, find the video. We talk about two key papers. It's not going to show here in the legend because there's not going to be one, but you can always give a like, and that's fine. But the key paper is a paper that is very representative of that science, of that literature, of that method. And usually a paper you trust, a paper you know it's good. It has been reviewed in one of our data science calls and we found it good. It has been written by one of us and it has been published. It has been well received, or it's a seminal paper in the field or something like that. You'll start with that paper. So I'm going to find a key paper on feasibility studies. So that's going to be Satan, alcohol, feasibility practice. So here, this is probably the best paper in the world about feasibility studies. Of course, not biased to say that, but once you go into the paper, let me get the version here. So then this is where I'm going to find the structure for my template. I'm going to come here. I'm not going to work with the introduction because we have a structure for the introduction, but I'm going to get the objectives and how the objectives were reported. And I'm going to come and put here. I can clean this later. So I have an example of an objective here from the study. Then the methods. How were the methods described? So here I have the study design. I'm going to go there and copy study design. I have study setting. No wonder that we were following a very good structure. Look at that. Participants and eligibility, enrollment and retention process, randomization. And I would just copy all of these sections there and then you would fix it. But you know the sections. And I would also copy the text. And this is the first text that I would start editing to create the template. So let's say that I'm going to report my sample size. So I would have here sample size, and then I'm going to put this text here. I'm going to keep a version of it, for example. And then I'm going to have a version here where I'm going to start editing for the template. So this feasibility study was created to pilot. And then here it's going to be intervention. Thank you, Shallow. The sample size was determined based on feasibility of these methods, not as a power analysis for effective research. Okay, I'm going to leave this the way it is because it's a very good sentence. Sample size of our feasibility enrollment was to mimic our trial location on a smaller scale and pilot the adaptation between these stages. So here we have to change and pilot the method, the trial design that you're going to write here. We included at least, and then here we're going to say number of participants in each arm to test intervention. I'd say here to test goal of the sample size. Since this trial was aimed at assessing feasibility and was not powered to detect statistical differences in performance of each arm, we continued the, and here you say intervention arm according to hypothesized design. So now I have a template, okay? Of course, there are pieces of this text that are probably a little too specific to the Pract, because Pract is such a complicated design. I might want to simplify this part, for instance, but I don't know. But this is a good template that's based on previous work that we've done, and that somebody can start writing about this. However, as great as we are, and as much as I love our group, we don't do everything right all the time. So what I would do is I would find another 2 or 3 papers out there published that are published on good journals, that are published by ideally authors that we know or know that are doing good job. And then I would get those information and I would then start incrementing my template based on information coming from other studies. And I would do that until we reach something that Anna loves, that she's not here to tell us anymore, which is thematic saturation. So I would do that until I find that I've covered the best way or most of the information that people use to report that particular methodology. So we can do that for analytical papers. We can do that for methodological reporting. And I specifically want to do that for objective statements for different methodologies. So people state the right objective. I've also been noticing that we are missing the boat on how we state an objective for a project that is about a particular method. So this is the approach that I have been using and that I want us to use in our exercise in December. And as you've seen, it's something that we can do fairly quickly and easy if you put ourselves to do it, because the information is already out there, and these are all methods that we already know. And I can tell you from our experience with systematic reviews, this approach works, because ever since we started using templates from the systematic review course to write systematic review papers, we never really got feedback on a systematic review about the method. It was always a feedback around some framing, some feedback around more data, or a reviewer that didn't like. But methodologically speaking, we never got feedback anymore until Prisma 2020 came out, and now we have to update the template, and we never did. But that's another story to tell. But that's what we want to do, and that's what really I think is going to improve our group's quality going forward, and it serves all of you. Because then when Pamela wants to do a survival analysis, she's going to have these documents to go through, and she's going to jumpstart. So she's not going to come to me and send a message and say, hey, do you have some documents I can read about survival analysis? Or do you have some codes about survival analysis? No, they're going to be there. Come to us with questions. Sensitivity analysis, the question. Okay. All right. Does anybody want to add
Your
anything?
connection was a tiny bit unstable there, João, but I guess we understood you.
Well, tiny bit unstable at what point? Entirely, or
no. At the end, you were saying
No.
like, the Pamela doesn't need to come to me to ask for references and stuff, but I guess we got the picture there.
No, just note that I think this is an important video. So if the recording is not good, then I'll just record it again.
No. The recording is fine. Actually, it's just messing with you. One thing that I wanted to mention as well is that when we do these efforts of getting the text, the template text from different publications, etc., it's always something that we want to be careful with plagiarism. So whenever we are done with the paper, we can always go through and use the resources that Duke provide, which is called Authenticate. Yes. And depending on, basically it screens the paper and tells you how close it is related to published abstracts, published papers, etc. And then you can go ahead and make the edits necessary. Of course, there are things that in methods for like study design, you're gonna get a lot of hits. Like this study is a cross-sectional study, so basically this is fine. But then again, if you're just copying and just doing minor changes, it's not gonna be good. But anyway, that's a very good way to go by it. And we even have a recording of how to use Authenticate as well.
Yeah.
Tutorial.
But that's a concern we need to have when the paper's ready. For now, I don't want you to be worried about copying things. Copy things. In worst case scenario, by the end of the template, we just throw it on ChatGPT and ask it to rewrite. And that will work. So let's not create a barrier, but I think it's very important that we go through Authenticate for every single paper we do before submission. That's something I've been very, very concerned about. But yeah, it's great point, Sean. Okay, so there's no barriers for us to do templates. Start thinking about templates you want to tackle. There's a list of them on the toolbox. I think the first stage of the Wonderland will be clean that and focus on the ones that we really want to focus now. And I really want to distribute this because as we've always done in our group, the idea is to be transparent, is to share knowledge and allow peers to work with each other and get their development. And these are the ways we can do this, okay? And our goal with the December activity will be to develop a template and have everybody criticize it, and then develop and criticize it so that we can start having these documents to use as the year starts. Cool. All right. We are going to focus on templates for writing and templates for analysis. I'm not going to focus on SOPs. That's going to be another iteration for another post-this festive goal that we'll do. We'll decide which one. Okay. Sweet. All right. That's what I had.